The slave markets of Zirian Prime stank of fear and desperation. Princess Zarathel of the Vortak Empire pressed herself against the cold metal bars of her cage, her silver skin dulled by weeks of captivity. The elegant ceremonial robes that once marked her royal status had been replaced with rough prisoner garments that chafed against her delicate frame. Her large violet eyes, once filled with the confidence of nobility, now darted nervously between the various alien species that wandered the marketplace, evaluating their potential purchases like livestock. The Korthani slavers had been clever in their attack on her diplomatic vessel. They waited until her ship passed through the neutral zone between empires, far from any rescue attempts. Her entire retinue had been killed or scattered, leaving her alone and defenseless for the first time in her privileged life. The irony was not lost on her that the princess who had spent years advocating for peace between species was now being sold like common cargo. "Fresh merchandise today," bellowed Grax, the hulking Korthani overseer, his forearms gesturing dramatically at the cages. "Royal blood from the Vortak Empire. Educated, trained in diplomacy, perfect for household management or entertainment." Zarathel winced at the crude description. The buyers who approached her cage were a mixture of species she recognized and others that were completely alien to her. Most looked at her with the cold calculation of someone evaluating an expensive tool. Some whispered among themselves about the political implications of owning Vortak royalty. Others seemed more interested in her physical appearance, making comments that made her retreat further into the shadows of her confinement. The morning wore on with little interest from serious buyers. The price Grax had set was apparently too high for most of the market's usual clientele. Zarathel found herself almost hoping no one would purchase her, even though she knew that would likely mean being sent to the mining colonies, a fate arguably worse than private ownership. It was near midday when she first noticed the human. He was unremarkable by most standards, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Humans were still relatively new to this part of the galaxy, having only recently developed faster than light travel. Most species considered them primitive, barely worth acknowledgement. This one appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair at his temples and weathered hands that suggested a life of physical labor. He wore simple, practical clothing and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen considerable hardship. What struck Zarathel most was that while other potential buyers examined her like an object, the human's eyes met hers with something she had not seen in weeks: recognition of her humanity. Not the calculating gaze of someone appraising property, but the look of one sentient being acknowledging another's suffering. "You interested in this one, human?" Grax asked, noticing the man's prolonged attention. "She's expensive, but quality goods. Royal breeding, diplomatic training, very refined." The human stepped closer to the cage, his weathered face impassive. "What's her story?" "Captured during a pirate raid on a diplomatic vessel," Grax explained, clearly pleased to have an interested buyer. "Pure Vortak nobility. Her family will pay handsomely for her return, or you could keep her for personal service. Very intelligent, speaks 12 languages." Zarathel watched the human's expression carefully. Unlike the others who had approached, he seemed uncomfortable with Grax's sales pitch. His jaw tightened slightly when the Korthani mentioned personal service, and his hands clenched almost imperceptibly. "How much?" the human asked quietly. The price Grax quoted was astronomical, enough to purchase a small starship. Zarathel expected the human to laugh or walk away like the others. Instead, he nodded slowly and reached into a worn leather pouch at his side. "I'll take her," he said, producing what appeared to be a substantial credit chip. The transaction was completed with surprising speed. Grax seemed eager to finalize the sale before the human could change his mind. As the cage door opened for the first time in weeks, Zarathel felt a mixture of relief and terror. She had no idea what this human intended for her, but anything had to be better than the uncertainty of the market. The human gestured for her to follow him, making no move to restrain her as they walked through the crowded marketplace. Other slaves were led away in chains or neural collars, but her new owner seemed content to let her walk freely beside him. The strangeness of this behavior was not lost on the other vendors and buyers, many of whom stared openly at the unlikely pair. They made their way to a small spaceport on the edge of the market district. The human ship was modest but well-maintained, clearly designed for long-range cargo transport rather than luxury. As they approached the boarding ramp, Zarathel found her voice for the first time since her capture. "What do you intend to do with me?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse but still carrying traces of her royal bearing. The human paused at the ship's entrance and turned to face her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were a deep brown, filled with what appeared to be genuine concern. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said simply. "And I intend to take you home." The words hit her with unexpected force. After weeks of being treated as property, being spoken to with basic respect felt overwhelming. "Why?" she managed to ask. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Because everyone deserves to be free," he said finally. "And because I know what it's like to be far from home with no way back." As they entered the ship, Zarathel noticed that Marcus moved with the efficiency of someone long accustomed to solitary travel. The interior was clean but sparse, equipped with the basic necessities for extended space travel. He showed her to a small but private cabin, completely unlike the cramped cages she had grown accustomed to. "This is yours while you're aboard," Marcus said, indicating the room. "The door locks from the inside if you want privacy. There's a small food synthesizer and basic medical supplies. The refresher unit is through that door." Zarathel stared at him in confusion. "You're giving me my own quarters? With privacy locks?" Marcus seemed puzzled by her surprise. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" The simple question revealed the vast cultural gap between them. In her weeks of captivity, Zarathel had learned that most species in this part of the galaxy viewed slaves as property without rights or dignity. The concept that a human would purchase her only to treat her as an equal was almost incomprehensible. "Most owners don't provide privacy to their property," she said carefully, still uncertain of his true intentions. Marcus's expression darkened. "You're not property. You're a person who got caught up in circumstances beyond your control. As soon as we can arrange safe passage back to Vorthak space, you'll be free." Over the following days, as they traveled toward the neutral zone, Zarathel began to understand that Marcus meant exactly what he said. He made no demands on her time or service. She was free to move about the ship as she pleased. He prepared meals for both of them and included her in conversations about their route and destination. Most remarkably, he seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, often asking for her input on diplomatic protocols or cultural considerations for their journey. Slowly, she began to share pieces of her story. She told him about her work as a diplomatic envoy, her efforts to build peaceful relationships between species, and her frustration with the endless conflicts that plagued the galaxy. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally sharing his own experiences as a freelance cargo hauler who had seen too much suffering in his travels. "Why do you do this?" she asked one evening as they shared a simple meal in the ship's small common area. "Travel alone, I mean. Most humans prefer to stay close to their colonies." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars visible through the ship's viewport. "I lost my family in a raid 5 years ago," he said finally. "Pirates hit our settlement while I was away on a supply run. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but wreckage." Zarathel felt a pang of sympathy. "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was," Marcus acknowledged. "For a while, I thought about revenge, hunting down the pirates responsible. But that path only leads to more violence. So instead, I decided to try to help where I could. Small things, mostly. Delivering supplies to isolated colonies, providing transport for refugees, occasionally buying someone's freedom when I can afford it." "Is that what I am to you?" Zarathel asked. "A good deed to ease your conscience?" Marcus met her eyes directly. "No," he said firmly. "You're someone who deserves better than what happened to you. Your freedom isn't a favor I'm granting you. It's a right that was stolen from you." The distinction was important, though Zarathel was still learning to understand human perspectives on individual rights and personal autonomy. Vorthak society was highly structured around family obligations and social hierarchy. The idea that freedom was an inherent right rather than a privilege granted by authority was foreign but compelling. As they entered the third week of their journey, they encountered their first serious obstacle. A Korthani patrol vessel intercepted them at a checkpoint in the border region. Marcus had anticipated this possibility and had prepared false documentation identifying Zarathel as his diplomatic aide rather than his property. The Korthani boarding party was led by a captain who seemed suspicious of the unusual pairing. "Strange to see a human traveling with Vorthak nobility," he commented, studying their documents with obvious skepticism. "Princess Zarathel is serving as my cultural advisor for trade negotiations in the neutral zone," Marcus replied calmly. "Her diplomatic credentials are in order.
The Korthani captain turned his attention to Zarathel. "You're working for this human voluntarily, princess?" Zarathel realized this was a crucial moment.
A word from her could expose Marcus's deception and likely result in her return to the slave markets.
Instead, she drew upon her diplomatic training and answered with calm authority.
"Mr. Chen has proven to be an honorable business partner," she said, managing to keep her voice steady.
"Our arrangement is mutually beneficial."
The captain studied them both for several tense moments before finally returning their documents.
"Safe travels," he said, though his tone suggested continued suspicion.
After the patrol ship departed, Zarathel found Marcus in the ship's small engine compartment, performing routine maintenance with hands that shook slightly from residual adrenaline.
"Thank you," he said without looking up from his work. "You could have turned me in back there." "Why would I do that?" Zarathel asked, genuinely puzzled.
Marcus paused in his work and met her eyes.
"Because I'm nobody special.
Just a human cargo hauler with a second-hand ship and more good intentions than common sense."
"You're royalty.
Your word carries weight in ways mine never could."
Zarathel considered this for a moment.
In the past month, she had seen more genuine honor and compassion from this unremarkable human than from most of the nobility she had known all her life.
"You're wrong about one thing," she said finally. "You are someone special, Marcus Chen.
And, when we reach Vortex space, I intend to make sure my people understand exactly what kind of man you are."
The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship.
What had begun as a rescue mission was becoming something deeper, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared experiences of loss and hope. Neither of them fully understood yet how profoundly this journey would change both their lives, but, as they continued toward the distant lights of Vortex space, both began to believe that perhaps the galaxy was not as dark a place as they had feared. The stars wheeled overhead as Marcus's ship pressed on through the vast emptiness between worlds, carrying two unlikely companions toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The alarm klaxons shattered the peaceful quiet of Marcus's ship as they approached the outer edge of Vortex space. Princess Zarathel rushed to the cockpit where Marcus was already hunched over the sensor displays, his weathered face grim with concentration. "What is it?" she asked, though the tactical readouts were beginning to paint an alarming picture even to her diplomatic eyes.
"3 Korthani destroyers, running dark until we got close enough to detect them," Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the navigation controls. "They've been waiting for us."
The main communications array crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The familiar bulk of Captain Beckstar filled the screen, his forearms spread in what Zarathel recognized as a gesture of superior authority among his species. "Human vessel, you are carrying stolen Korthani property," the captain's voice rumbled through the speakers.
"Surrender the Vortex female immediately and we may allow you to depart with your life."
Marcus looked at Zarathel, his expression carefully neutral.
"Your choice, princess."
"I can try to run, but those are military vessels.
They'll catch us eventually." Zarathel felt the familiar weight of royal responsibility settling on her shoulders.
For a moment, she considered surrendering herself to save Marcus from what would certainly be a death sentence. Then, she thought about the past weeks of freedom, of being treated as an equal rather than property, of the quiet dignity with which this human had refused to see her as anything less than a person deserving respect. "Run," she said firmly.
Marcus nodded once and activated the ship's emergency protocols. The lights dimmed as power was redirected to engines and defensive systems. "Hold on," he warned. "This is going to get rough."
The next few hours tested the limits of both Marcus's piloting skills and his ship's aging systems. The Korthani destroyers were faster and more heavily armed, but Marcus had decades of experience running cargo through dangerous space. He used every trick he had learned, ducking through asteroid fields, exploiting sensor shadows, and pushing his engines far beyond their recommended tolerances. During a brief respite while they hid in the shadow of a dead moon, Zarathel found Marcus in the engine compartment, frantically rerouting power conduits that had been damaged by their desperate maneuvers. "Why are you doing this?" she asked.
"You could have handed me over. They might have let you go."
Marcus paused in his work, a damaged circuit board in his hands.
"Because that's not who I am," he said simply. "And, more importantly, it's not who humans are. We don't abandon people who trust us."
"But, you barely know me," Zarathel protested.
"I'm not even your species. What could possibly be worth risking your life for a stranger?"
Marcus set down the circuit board and looked at her directly.
You're not a stranger anymore. You're my friend.
And, friends don't abandon each other. The concept of friendship transcending species boundaries was still foreign to Zarathel, but she was beginning to understand that humans operated by different rules than most galactic civilizations. Where others saw differences and categories, humans seemed to see individuals worthy of respect and protection. Their conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms. The Korthani had found them again. This time, the pursuit led them into a dangerous region of space known as the Shattered Belt, where an ancient war had left behind a maze of destroyed starships and unstable gravitational fields. Most pilots avoided the area, but Marcus guided his ship into the treacherous navigation channels with the confidence of someone who had no other choice.
The gravitational shears will mask our engine's signature, he explained as he navigated between the hulks of long-dead battleships.
But one wrong move and we'll be just another piece of wreckage. The Korthani destroyers followed them into the belt, but their larger size worked against them in the tight confines. Marcus used this advantage to stay ahead of his pursuers, threading his smaller ship through gaps that the destroyers couldn't safely navigate. It was during this deadly game of cat and mouse that they encountered something unexpected, a distress signal from a damaged Vorthak scout ship trapped in the gravitational field of a particularly large piece of wreckage.
That's one of ours, Zarathel said, studying the signal patterns. A diplomatic courier vessel.
They must have been caught in the same trap that we're trying to avoid. Marcus studied the tactical situation.
Rescuing the Vorthak ship would require him to expose his own vessel to the pursuing Korthani destroyers.
The smart move would be to continue running and hope the stranded Vorthaks could eventually free themselves. Instead, he changed course toward the distress signal.
What are you doing? Zarathel asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer.
What's right, Marcus replied, beginning the delicate process of matching trajectories with the damaged Vorthak ship. The rescue operation required precise coordination between the two vessels. Marcus had to use his ship's tractor beam to pull the Vorthak courier free from the gravitational trap while avoiding the debris field that could destroy both ships. The process was made even more dangerous by the approaching Korthani destroyers, whose weapons were now within effective range. Human vessel, cease your current actions and surrender both Vorthak ships, came the demand from Captain Vextar.
You have 30 seconds to comply before we open fire.
Marcus ignored the ultimatum and continued the rescue operation.
The Vorthak ship was almost free when the first Korthani plasma bolts began streaking past his hull.
The energy weapons lit up the debris field like a deadly fireworks display, sending fragments of ancient metal spinning through space.
Got them! Marcus announced as the Vorthak courier finally broke free from the gravitational trap. Now let's see if we can all get out of here alive. The Vorthak ship's captain immediately hailed Marcus's vessel. The face that appeared on screen was familiar to Zarathel, Commander Thyron, one of her father's most trusted military advisors. Princess Zarathel. By the stars, we thought you were dead. The commander's relief was evident even through the formal protocols of military communication. How did you escape from the slavers?
It's a long story, Commander, Zarathel replied.
Right now we need to focus on getting away from those Korthani destroyers.
Commander Thyron's expression hardened as he processed the tactical situation.
One human cargo vessel and one damaged courier ship against 3 Korthani destroyers. The odds are not favorable.
Then, we better improve them, Marcus said, his fingers dancing across the navigation controls.
Commander, can your ship still fight?
Our weapons are functional, but our engines are operating at only 60% capacity, Thyron replied.
Marcus nodded. Here's what we're going to do. The gravitational shears in this area work both ways.
If we can lure the destroyers into the right position, we might be able to use the debris field against them. The plan was audacious and dangerous, requiring split-second timing and perfect coordination between the two ships. Marcus would serve as bait, drawing the destroyers deeper into the debris field while Commander Thyron positioned his ship to exploit the gravitational anomalies that made the region so treacherous. Human, this plan requires one ship to serve as a target while the other maneuvers into position, Commander Thyron pointed out. It would be more logical for the military vessel to serve as bait while the civilian ship provides support. With respect, Commander, this is my ship and my call, Marcus replied. Besides, I know this debris field better than anyone. I've been using it to hide from pirates for years.
Zarathel watched the exchange with growing amazement.
Here was a human civilian, with no military rank or official authority, calmly taking command of a situation that involved the safety of Vorthak royalty and military personnel. More remarkably, Commander Thyron was accepting his leadership without question, apparently recognizing that competence and courage mattered more than formal hierarchy. The plan unfolded with clockwork precision. Marcus guided his ship through the most dangerous parts of the debris field, using his intimate knowledge of the gravitational patterns to stay just ahead of the pursuing destroyers. The Korthani captains, frustrated by their inability to corner their quarry, pressed their attack more aggressively. That aggression proved to be their downfall. As they pursued Marcus deeper into the field, they lost track of the larger gravitational hazards. Commander Thyron waited until all 3 destroyers were committed to their attack run before firing his weapons at a massive piece of wreckage that had been teetering on the edge of gravitational collapse. The ancient battleship hull, already weakened by centuries of stress, finally gave way under the plasma bombardment. The resulting gravitational cascade caught all 3 Korthani destroyers in an unstoppable pull toward the heart of the debris field. The military vessels, designed for open space combat, were too large and unwieldy to escape the gravitational trap. Marcus watched on his sensors as the 3 destroyers were drawn inexorably into the crushing embrace of twisted metal and exotic matter. There would be no survivors. "It's over," he announced quietly. The journey to the nearest Vorthak station took another 2 days, during which Commander Thyron had ample opportunity to question both Marcus and Princess Zarathel about the circumstances of her rescue. The commander's initial skepticism about human motives gradually gave way to respect as the full story emerged. "You purchased the princess's freedom with your own resources, expecting nothing in return," Thyron summarized during their final approach to the station. "Then, you risked your life multiple times to ensure her safe return to Vorthak space. By any military standard, your actions constitute exceptional valor." Marcus seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Commander Thyron replied firmly. "What you did was extraordinary. Most species would have seen only the potential profit in returning a Vorthak princess. You saw a person who needed help." As they docked with the orbital station, Zarathel found herself torn between relief at returning home and sadness at leaving behind the unexpected friendship she had formed with Marcus. The human had shown her a different way of viewing the galaxy, one where individual worth wasn't determined by species or social rank. "What will you do now?" she asked as they prepared to disembark. Marcus shrugged. "Go back to running cargo, I suppose. There's always someone who needs supplies moved from one place to another." "You could stay," Zarathel offered. "My father would certainly grant you citizenship, maybe a position in our diplomatic service. We could use someone with your perspective." For a moment, Marcus seemed tempted by the offer. Then, he shook his head. "Thank you, but there are too many people out there who still need help. Besides, I'm not really the settling down type." Zarathel nodded, understanding even though she was disappointed. "Then, this isn't goodbye forever. When you're ready to stop wandering, you'll always have a place with the Vorthak Empire." As Marcus prepared to depart, Commander Thyron approached him with a small ceremonial box. "Princess Zarathel asked me to give you this," he said formally. Inside the box was a crystal pendant, glowing with soft blue light. Zarathel explained its significance. "It's a beacon stone, keyed to Vorthak frequencies. If you're ever in danger and within range of our territory, activate it and help will come." Marcus accepted the gift with genuine gratitude. As his ship departed the station and disappeared into the star-filled void, both Zarathel and Commander Thyron stood at the observation deck, watching until the navigation lights faded from view. "Remarkable species, these humans," Thyron commented. "Yes," Zarathel agreed. "They are." Neither of them suspected that this was only the beginning of a relationship that would eventually reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy. 3 months after Marcus Chen had disappeared into the void beyond Vorthak space, Princess Zarathel stood before the assembled council of nobles, presenting her proposal for a new diplomatic initiative. The ornate chamber, with its soaring crystal arches and holographic star maps, had been the seat of Vorthak power for over 1,000 years. Today, she hoped it would witness the beginning of a fundamental shift in how her people viewed the galaxy. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying the confidence that had returned to her since her rescue, "I stand before you today to propose a radical expansion of our diplomatic outreach, specifically targeting the human colonies and their emerging governments." A murmur of skepticism rippled through the chamber. Counselor Veltar, an elderly noble whose family had held power for centuries, raised one of his forearms to signal his desire to speak. Princess, while we are grateful for your safe return, surely your experiences have colored your judgment regarding these primitives, he said with the condescending tone that had always irritated Zarathel.
Humans have been in space for less than 50 standard years.
They have no unified government, no significant military power, and their technology is centuries behind our own.
What possible benefit could alliance with such creatures provide? Zarathel had anticipated this objection.
She had spent weeks preparing her response, knowing that changing centuries of Vorthak isolationism would require more than emotional appeals.
Counselor Veltar raises valid points about human technological limitations, she acknowledged.
However, he fails to account for the most important factor, the human capacity for growth and adaptation. In their brief time in space, they have established colonies on over 200 worlds, survived 3 separate conflicts with established powers, and demonstrated remarkable innovation in overcoming their technological disadvantages.
She activated a holographic display showing recent intelligence reports from human space.
More importantly, they possess something we have lost in our centuries of civilization, the ability to see past species barriers and judge individuals by their actions rather than their origins.
The presentation continued for over an hour, with Zarathel methodically addressing each concern raised by the Council.
She spoke of human resilience, their unique problem-solving approaches, and their potential as future allies rather than primitive neighbors to be ignored. Throughout her presentation, she carefully avoided mentioning Marcus by name, knowing that focusing on personal relationships would undermine her political arguments. The debate that followed was intense. Conservative counselors argued that the Vorthak Empire had thrived for millennia without human involvement and saw no reason to change now. Progressive voices, led by Counselor Kaivana, suggested that the galaxy was changing rapidly and that isolation was no longer a viable strategy.
The Korthani slave raids are becoming bolder, Kaivana pointed out. The hegemony is expanding its territory through aggressive conquest.
The old balance of power is shifting.
Perhaps it is time to consider new alliances. The session concluded without a formal vote, but Zarathel could sense the shifting political currents.
Her presentation had planted seeds of doubt about the wisdom of continued isolation.
Now she needed to nurture those seeds while waiting for the right opportunity to push for formal action.
That opportunity came sooner than expected, in the form of a distress signal detected at the edge of Vorthak space. The signal was weak and badly garbled, transmitted on frequencies commonly used by human vessels. More troubling, the automated distress beacon indicated that the ship was carrying refugees from a colony that had been destroyed by unknown attackers.
Commander Thyron, now serving as Zarathel's military liaison, brought her the report personally. The signal is definitely human in origin, he confirmed.
Long-range sensors detect one small vessel, heavily damaged and barely maintaining life support. They're requesting assistance and permission to enter Vorthak space. Under normal circumstances, the request would have been denied automatically. Vorthak space was closed to most foreign vessels, and humans had never been granted transit rights.
However, Zarathel saw an opportunity to demonstrate the principles she had been advocating. Prepare a rescue mission, she ordered. Full medical and technical support. Thyron raised an eyebrow.
Princess, you don't have the authority to grant transit rights to foreign vessels.
The Council would need to approve any rescue operation in Vorthak space. Then, we'll operate in neutral space, Zarathel replied. Assemble a medical team and a technical crew.
We leave within the hour. The rescue operation revealed the full scope of the tragedy. The human vessel was an old cargo hauler, its hull scarred by energy weapons and its engines barely functional. Aboard were 43 survivors from New Geneva, a human agricultural colony that had been completely destroyed by hegemony raiders. Dr. Silnara, the expedition's chief medical officer, was visibly shaken as she examined the refugees. Princess, these injuries are consistent with systematic extermination protocols, she reported privately. The attackers weren't just raiding for resources.
They were trying to eliminate all witnesses.
The refugees' leader was a middle-aged woman named Captain Sarah Mitchell, formerly the colony's security chief. Despite her injuries and obvious exhaustion, she maintained the dignity of someone accustomed to command under pressure. We got maybe half the population to the evacuation ships before they overwhelmed our defenses, she explained to Zarathel during the initial interview. The other ships scattered in different directions.
We don't know if any of them made it out. Zarathel found herself deeply moved by the refugees' stories. These were farmers, teachers, engineers, and families who had been living peaceful lives until violence had destroyed everything they had built. Their accounts reminded her painfully of her own recent experience with helplessness and fear. "What will you do now?" she asked Captain Mitchell. The human woman's expression was grim. "Try to reach one of the core human worlds, I suppose. Report what happened and hope somebody cares enough to investigate. Not much else we can do." The return journey to Vorthak space gave Zarathel time to think. By the time they reached the orbital station, she had made a decision that would test the limits of her political influence. The emergency council session she called was unlike anything in recent Vorthak history. Instead of the usual formal debates conducted in the abstract language of diplomacy, Zarathel brought the human refugees directly before the assembled nobles. Captain Mitchell, still bearing the visible wounds of her colony's destruction, stood in the center of the great chamber and told her story with simple, devastating clarity. She spoke of families torn apart, of homes burned, of children who would never see their parents again. She made no appeals for sympathy or assistance, simply reported what had happened with the straightforward honesty of a soldier delivering a mission briefing. The effect on the council was electric. Many of the nobles had never encountered humans before, and the reality of their suffering was far different from the abstract discussions of policy they were accustomed to. When Captain Mitchell finished her testimony, the chamber fell into unusual silence. Finally, Councillor Veltar spoke, his voice lacking its usual condescension. "Captain Mitchell, you have our sympathy for your losses," he said formally. "However, the Vorthak Empire has maintained neutrality in galactic conflicts for over 800 years. What you describe is tragic, but it is not our responsibility." Before Captain Mitchell could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. "With respect, Councillor, I disagree." Every head turned toward the speaker. Marcus Chen stood at the entrance to the chamber, his simple clothing marking him as completely out of place among the ornate robes and ceremonial decorations of Vorthak nobility. His presence was so unexpected that several councillors rose from their seats in surprise. "Marcus!" Zarathel exclaimed, unable to hide her delight at seeing him again. "How did you?" "The beacon stone you gave me," Marcus replied, showing the glowing crystal pendant. "It seems your people monitor their frequencies more carefully than I expected." Commander Thyron, who had obviously been responsible for responding to the beacon's signal, stepped forward. "Mr. Chen's ship was intercepted at the border 2 hours ago," he explained. "Given his previous service to the Empire, I took the liberty of granting him diplomatic immunity." Marcus walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, his eyes taking in the assembled nobles with calm assessment. When he reached Captain Mitchell, he placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. "Sarah," he said quietly. "I'm sorry about New Geneva. David Morrison sent word through the underground network. We've been looking for survivor ships for weeks." The reunion between the two humans was brief but emotional. Then, Marcus turned to address the council directly. "Councillors, Captain Mitchell is too polite to say what needs to be said, so I will," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "The hegemony isn't just attacking random human colonies. They're testing responses, probing for weaknesses. They want to see who will defend the innocent and who will hide behind neutrality." Councillor Veltar bristled at the implied criticism. "Human, you forget yourself. You have no standing to address this council, and your people's conflicts are not our concern." Marcus met the nobleman's gaze steadily. "You're right about one thing, Councillor. I have no official standing here. I'm just a cargo hauler who's seen too much suffering in his travels. But I do know something about the hegemony that you apparently don't." He activated a portable holographic projector, displaying intelligence data that made several councillors lean forward with sudden interest. "The hegemony has been systematically eliminating potential rivals for the past 5 years," Marcus continued. "They started with isolated colonies and single-system governments. Now they're moving against established powers. 3 Zalani trade worlds have gone silent in the past month. The Carishan Republic has lost 2 entire fleets to unknown attackers. And yesterday, long-range sensors detected a massive hegemony fleet massing just outside Vorthak space." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Councillor Kaivana stood immediately. "Is this intelligence verified?" "As verified as anything can be when entire worlds are disappearing," Marcus replied grimly. The question isn't whether the hegemony is coming for you. The question is whether you'll stand alone when they arrive, or whether you'll have allies willing to fight beside you. The debate that followed lasted through the night. Marcus and Captain Mitchell were eventually asked to withdraw while the council deliberated, but not before several nobles had questioned them extensively about hegemony tactics and capabilities. Zarathal found them in one of the station's observation lounges, staring out at the stars while they waited for the council's decision. "You came back," she said to Marcus, settling into a chair beside him. "I never really left," Marcus replied. "I've been running supplies to refugee ships and gathering intelligence on hegemony movements. When I heard about New Geneva, I knew it was time to try a different approach." "And if the council refuses to act?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then, we fight alone, like we always have. But, at least we'll know we tried." The council session resumed at dawn, with a formal vote on 3 separate proposals: immediate military alliance with human forces, expanded diplomatic relations with human governments, and continued neutrality with increased border security. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. When Councillor Kaibana announced the results, her voice carried a note of historic significance. By a margin of 6 votes, the council approves expanded diplomatic relations with human governments, effective immediately. By a margin of 3 votes, the council approves limited military cooperation in matters of mutual security. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For the first time in centuries, the Vortak Empire had voted to actively engage with another species as equals. Marcus caught Zarathel's eye across the chamber and smiled. It was a small victory, but sometimes small victories were enough to change the galaxy. The real work, they both knew, was just beginning. 6 months after the council's historic vote, the first joint human-Vortak military exercise was interrupted by an emergency that would test every principle both species claimed to value. Princess Zarathel stood on the bridge of the VS Harmony, the first Vortak vessel ever to carry a mixed crew of humans and aliens. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining Vortak energy systems with human tactical innovations to create something entirely new in galactic warfare. "Princess, we're receiving a distress signal from the Nexus station," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, who had accepted a position in the Joint Fleet after the destruction of her colony. "Multiple hegemony dreadnoughts have surrounded the station. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all human and Vortak personnel." Zarathel studied the tactical display with growing concern. Nexus Station was a neutral trading post located at the intersection of several major shipping routes. More importantly, it currently housed over 50,000 civilians from a dozen different species, including a significant population of refugees from recent hegemony attacks. "How long before our main fleet arrives?" she asked. 18 hours at best," replied Commander Thyron from his position at the tactical station. "The hegemony knows our response capabilities. They're betting we won't risk civilian casualties by attacking immediately." Marcus Chen, now serving as the fleet's strategic advisor despite his lack of formal military rank, studied the sensor readings with the intense focus that had become familiar to his colleagues. "They're not wrong," he said finally. "A direct assault on that many dreadnoughts would result in massive civilian casualties, even if we won." The communications array crackled to life with an incoming transmission from the hegemony fleet. The image that appeared on the main screen was that of Warlord Crossthal, a massive reptilian creature whose species had been absorbed into the hegemony through conquest rather than negotiation. "Vortak vessel," the Warlord's voice boomed through the bridge speakers, "you will withdraw immediately or face the consequences of interfering in hegemony operations. We have no quarrel with your empire at this time." Zarathel stepped forward, her royal bearing evident even in the simple military uniform she now wore. "Warlord Crossthal, I am Princess Zarathel of the Vortak Empire. The civilians on that station are under the protection of the Galactic Neutral Zone Treaty. Your actions constitute a clear violation of interstellar law." The warlord's laughter was a harsh, grating sound. "Treaties are for the weak, Princess. The strong take what they need. You have 1 hour to withdraw, or you will share the fate of all who oppose the hegemony." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Zarathel found herself facing the kind of impossible decision that had destroyed countless military careers and political legacies. Attack immediately and thousands of innocent civilians would die in the crossfire. Wait for reinforcements and the hegemony might execute their hostages or escape with valuable prisoners. Options, she asked her senior staff. We could attempt a diplomatic solution, suggested Commander Thyron.
Offer to exchange something the hegemony wants for the safe release of the civilians.
What could we possibly offer that they don't already plan to take by force?
Sarah Mitchell replied grimly.
These aren't rational actors looking for negotiated settlements. They're conquerors who see diplomacy as weakness.
Marcus had been quiet throughout the exchange, but now he leaned forward over the tactical display.
There might be another way, he said slowly. But it would require perfect timing and a lot of luck.
He outlined his plan quickly, using the holographic projectors to illustrate ship movements and tactical positions. As he spoke, the expressions on the faces around him shifted from skepticism to amazement to concern.
Marcus, that's completely insane, Sarah said when he finished. The number of things that could go wrong.
I know, Marcus replied.
But sometimes insane is what works when conventional tactics fail.
The question is whether we're willing to risk everything on the chance that we can save those civilians. Zarathel studied the plan carefully, considering all the variables and potential outcomes. As a diplomat, she was trained to seek compromise and peaceful solutions. As a princess, she understood the political consequences of military failure. But, as someone who had experienced captivity and helplessness firsthand, she knew that some risks were worth taking.
Do it, she decided.
The plan required splitting their small force into 3 groups, each with a specific role in what Marcus had dubbed organized chaos. The Harmony would serve as bait, drawing the hegemony dreadnoughts away from the station. 2 human destroyers would use their superior speed and maneuverability to create the illusion of a larger attacking force. Meanwhile, a mixed squadron of fighters and shuttles would attempt to evacuate civilians from the station under cover of the battle.
The execution began flawlessly.
The Harmony approached the hegemony fleet on an aggressive vector, broadcasting challenges and demands for the immediate release of all hostages. Warlord Crossthal, apparently convinced that the Vorthak princess was either incredibly brave or monumentally stupid, ordered 2 of his dreadnoughts to intercept and destroy her ship. As the massive hegemony vessels moved to engage, the human destroyers emerged from their hiding positions in a nearby asteroid field. Their sudden appearance, combined with sophisticated electronic warfare systems that made their sensor signatures appear much larger than they actually were, created exactly the confusion Marcus had hoped for. The hegemony formation, designed for overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility, began to fragment as individual captains reacted to what they perceived as attacks from multiple directions. In the growing chaos, the evacuation shuttle slipped through the defensive perimeter and began the dangerous work of extracting civilians from the station.
For 30 minutes, the plan worked perfectly.
Thousands of refugees were successfully evacuated while the hegemony fleet struggled to coordinate their response to what appeared to be a major assault by superior forces.
Then, everything went wrong at once.
The hegemony's tactical computers finally analyzed the electronic warfare signatures and determined that they were facing a much smaller force than initially believed. Warlord Crossthal immediately recalled his scattered ships and concentrated their firepower on the Harmony, correctly identifying it as the keystone of the entire operation.
The Vorthak ship's shields buckled under the concentrated bombardment. Fires erupted throughout the vessel as overloaded systems failed catastrophically.
In the engineering section, human and Vorthak technicians worked side by side to maintain power to essential systems, their species differences forgotten in the face of common danger. On the bridge, sparks flew from damaged control panels as the ship's superstructure groaned under the stress of multiple impacts.
Shield generators are failing, reported the engineering officer.
We've lost primary weapons and maneuvering thrusters.
Zarathel felt the deck shudder beneath her feet as another barrage struck home.
Around her, the mixed crew continued their duties with professional calm, but she could see the growing desperation in their eyes. They had succeeded in evacuating over 30,000 civilians, but at the cost of their own lives. Marcus appeared at her side, a grim smile on his blood-streaked face. "Princess, we need to abandon ship.
The reactor containment is failing."
Before Zarathel could respond, the communications array somehow managed to function long enough to receive an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on the cracked main screen was unexpected: Emperor Zelthek, Zarathel's father and supreme ruler of the Vorthak Empire. "My daughter," the Emperor said, his ancient voice carrying across the void with surprising clarity, "your actions today have brought great honor to our people. You have shown the galaxy that the Vorthak Empire stands with the innocent, regardless of species or origin." The transmission continued as explosions rocked the dying ship. The full Imperial fleet is en route to your position, but they will not arrive in time to save your vessel. However, your sacrifice will not be forgotten. The alliance you have forged between our peoples will endure. As if summoned by the Emperor's words, new contacts appeared on the damaged sensors. A massive fleet was emerging from hyperspace, but these weren't Vorthack vessels. The ships bore the markings of over a dozen different species, humans, naturally, but also Zolani traders, Carishan Republicans, and even some former hegemony worlds that had managed to break free from conquest. At the head of this unlikely armada was a familiar silhouette, Marcus's old cargo hauler, now bristling with weapons and communication arrays that marked it as a command vessel. All hegemony vessels, this is Admiral Chen of the Free Worlds Alliance, came the transmission that filled every communications frequency in the system. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Chen. Zarathel smiled despite the chaos around her. Trust Marcus to find a way to turn a desperate rescue mission into the foundation of a new galactic alliance. Warlord Crossthal's response was predictably defiant, but his tactical situation was hopeless. The Free Worlds Alliance fleet had emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, surrounding the hegemony ships with overwhelming firepower. More importantly, the diverse nature of the Alliance fleet sent a clear message: the age of conquest through superior force was ending. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. Faced with certain destruction, most of the hegemony captains chose surrender over futile resistance. Warlord Crossthal himself was captured when his flagship's bridge was stormed by a joint team of human marines and Vorthack commandos. As rescue ships approached the dying Harmony, Zarathel found herself standing beside Marcus at one of the few remaining functional stations. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly, with humans and Vorthacks working together to save everyone aboard the damaged vessel. Admiral Chen, she asked with raised eyebrow. Marcus shrugged self-consciously. It seemed like the kind of situation that called for some official-sounding authority. Besides, someone had to coordinate all those different fleets into something resembling a unified force. And how exactly did you manage to assemble an alliance of over a dozen species in less than 6 months? Same way you convinced your council to change 8 centuries of policy, Marcus replied. One conversation at a time, one crisis at a time, one act of courage at a time. People want to believe that things can be better. They just need someone to show them how. The rescue operation completed successfully, with all hands evacuated from the Harmony before its final destruction. The ship that had symbolized cooperation between humans and Vorthacks was gone, but the alliance it represented was stronger than ever. In the weeks that followed, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered at Nexus Station to formalize what became known as the Galactic Freedom Charter. The document established principles of mutual defense, species equality, and individual rights that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. Princess Zarathel, now serving as the Vorthack Empire's first ambassador to the Free Worlds Alliance, stood with Marcus Chen on the observation deck of the rebuilt station, watching as ships from countless worlds came and went in peaceful commerce. Do you ever miss it? She asked. The simple life of a cargo hauler, wandering the galaxy without responsibilities? Marcus considered the question carefully. Sometimes, he admitted. But, then, I remember that we're not just individuals anymore. We're part of something bigger, something that gives hope to people who had given up on the possibility of justice or peace. The human concept of hope is remarkable, Zarathel mused. Most species see the future as predetermined by current conditions. Humans see it as something that can be changed through will and effort. Hope isn't just a human concept, Marcus replied. You had hope when you stood up to your council. Commander Thyron had hope when he supported you. All those species that joined the alliance had hope that things could be different. We just helped them remember that hope requires action to become reality. As they watched, a new ship approached the station. It was clearly of human design but incorporating technological innovations from a dozen different species. On its hull was painted a symbol that had become the unofficial emblem of the alliance, a simple star surrounded by representations of various species, all reaching toward the light. The ship docked smoothly, and, through the observation deck's transparasteel windows, they could see its crew disembarking. Humans worked alongside Vorthacks, Zolani, and others in the casual cooperation that had become commonplace throughout Alliance space. You know, Zarathel said thoughtfully, when this all started, I thought I was just trying to get home. I never imagined that home would become something so much larger. Marcus smiled.
The best journeys are the ones where you discover that the destination was never really the point. It was always about who you became along the way and who you helped become something better. Above them, the stars shone with the same ancient light they had always known. But, now, for the first time in galactic history, that light illuminated a future where hope was stronger than fear, where cooperation could triumph over conquest, and where the simple act of treating others with dignity could reshape the destiny of entire civilizations. The human cargo hauler and the alien princess who had started as strangers had become the architects of a new age. Their friendship had grown into an alliance that spanned star systems, their shared values had become the foundation of a new galactic order, and their quiet conviction that everyone deserved freedom had inspired countless others to make that conviction a reality. In the vast reaches of space, their story would be told for generations as proof that sometimes the most unlikely friendships could indeed change the galaxy.